Welcome to episode 3 of ArableAware, a podcast from Adama Agricultural Solutions UK. My name is Russell Goldsmith, and together with my resident experts from Adama, Andy Bailey and David Roberts, we've made our way to Home Farm in Swaffham, Norfolk, to join Richard Cobbold, who is the estate manager here. Now, after one of the hottest summers for years, in this episode we will be focusing on how the harvest has been and plans for the autumn season. As always, we'll be having a quick roundup from 2 of our growers from different parts of the country, plus we have an exclusive interview with the man behind FaceTime a Farmer, which all means that we have loads to get through, so let's get straight to it. Richard, David and Andy, welcome all to the show. Richard, let's come to you first. It's always good to get a little introduction to where we're recording each podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about Home Farm?
Yeah, here we're here at South Pickenham Estates, where we're based at Home Farm. We're a 3,000 hectare family owned estate in Norfolk, where we're growing wheat, barley, oilseed rape, spring barley and sugar beet largely. We also rent out between 500 and 600 hectares of land for a local vegetable grower, where we contribute and sell to them the water. We also have an organic setup where we have based on organic cattle. And yeah, that's really basically about it.
Excellent. I don't know if you can hear on the podcast the crunching under feet, but we're out here walking in the fields. You've actually brought us out to one of your fields of oilseed rape. How's it all looking following the harvest?
Yeah, we had to delay our oilseed rape drilling. Normally we would start around the sort of 4th or 5th of August to try and get everything in and away before the flea beetle issues. This year it was so dry then, we actually delayed. This was our first field we drilled. We drilled on the 15th of August. This is Elgar, drilled at 2.5 kilos, and it's come through a hit about 10 days ago where cabbage stem flea beetle really hammered it. I think we probably got them coming up at exactly the wrong time of year for that pest. But yeah, it seems to be getting away now with sort of 3 or 4 true leaves on it, and yeah, we're quite happy with it as it stands.
Excellent. David, what's your initial thoughts?
This crop looks very well. It's established very well, albeit it did have that pressure from an attack of flea beetle. We've got a very good plant stand here. We've got plants 4, 6 leaves on some of them, and it looks very even. You can see down the rows, and there's very little weed in here, so it's a very good start to this oilseed rape's life.
Excellent. Well, we'll take some pictures and share on our social feed if that's all right with you,
Absolutely.
Richard.
We can, for this field, certainly.
And Andy, any initial thoughts?
Yeah, I just wondered, Richard, do you think you've lost any plant numbers through flea beetle, or do you think? I mean, it looks as if it's come through it pretty well for me. I mean, it's.
I think in this field, I think we probably haven't. Certainly on fields this was our first field on like the 15th of August. By the time we were getting to sort of 22nd of August when we finished, we certainly had a lot more pressure where plants are now smaller. I think we're going to get through okay. I think the rain in the week has helped, and these cooler nights and etc, so lower temperatures, so I think we might well be just about through it.
Okay, because I mean I've seen that, you know, numbers of comments at the moment of people saying there's big areas under real threat at the minute, so it sounds as if you seem to have come through that reasonably well.
Yeah, and I wouldn't actually say last year very little. I wouldn't even say we're in a particularly hot spot for flea beetle. I think it's been an exceptional year, so I would have thought anyone that's in a hotspot area, good luck, because there must be. I've heard of areas on heavier ground. This is light soil. We can get good seed soil contact to get the plant in and away, so there's no sort of effect of the flea beetle being able to get beside a clod and snip it off before it comes up. So I think certainly most of it, yeah, we're not quite through it, but we're able to sleep a bit easier at night as far as flea beetle go at the moment.
The field looks very clear as far as weeds go. There's a few volunteers in here. It's had a herbicide already.
Yeah, this was sprayed with Legion, the metazochloroquine Merrick as a pre-emergence. We are planting on a strip till system, so there is still quite a lot of stubble and things around, but we feel that followed up in the spring with sort of a AstroCurb type approach, that it pretty much keeps us clean.
Well, it's quite timely that we've come out to your farm today, Richard, because you were recently featured in Farmers Weekly, talking about what you've been doing with your cover crops this summer. Can you give us a quick overview on what you discussed for any of our listeners that may have missed that article?
Yeah, the cover cropping thing really came about as this is very, very light brekkie land. We have a lot of spring cropping in it, and it just feels to me that it's the right thing to do not to leave this land open to the elements. One, it will blow. Two, it will wash off. And if you do get a harsh winter and quite a bit, it just runs together very, very tight, and compaction can go very deep. So what we're sort of thinking now is with a crop in it, you've got all the root structures inside, and basically we're just thinking that nothing scientific, you know, you can do all sorts of, it just seems to make sense that a crop in this land just holds it together. And certainly last year, the fields that we went into that had a cover crop on, one, we got on sooner, and two, just the structure, we were almost able to go and cut straight in on top as long as the structure hadn't been lost. We tend to using an oats and vetch as more of a sort of a cheap and cheerful £20 a hectare type approach in front of things like sugar beet, vining peas, just because we can then probably go and cut straight in. Where we think we've got trouble, or we've had more veg on it and we think we need to get more sort of root structure, even sort of deeper rooting in it, we've been using a TerraLife Rigol DSV mix, which has things like sunflowers, buckwheats, tillage radish, things like that in it. So we're certainly not doing it because we're sort of great eco warriors on it. It's done because I do genuinely feel, and I'm not sure why we haven't grasped this in years and years and years, because I think our forefathers always, there's a field, let's put a crop of stubble turnips in it, graze it, and then we'll put the sugar beet in. So I think we're just going back to where things were. So nothing too scientific, but it just makes good sense. And yeah, we're not doing anything hugely innovative. It just feels right. And I think that was hopefully the basis of what the article said.
Yeah, I think in the last 3, maybe 5 years that the popularity of cover cropping has grown significantly. As somebody who's interested in herbicides and weeds, there are a few differing opinions out there as to what benefits or even changes you can get in the weed populations. Have you seen any of those changes since adopting the cover cropping?
Certainly with the oats and vetch, you just tend to get your same sort of weeds as you would, because you're only putting 40 kilos in low plant count. You will still get weeds coming through in it. I'm not overly concerned, because by the time you're getting to January time when we're spraying it off, there's no seed in it. If anything, there's a bit more root. Where you do sort of see an effect, where you're using like these Rigol type mixes, where they're with the sunflowers, where they create a canopy very quickly. Okay. We have a lot of trouble with small nettle that comes through early in the spring, which is really hard to, well, you more or less can't kill it with glyphosate. So it becomes quite expensive to kill by having to add a sulfonal urea into your mix. We do find that it does tend to smother that out, and all you are actually killing with your glyphosate is the cover crop. Right. So from that perspective, yeah, there is an effect.
Minimal impact.
Yeah, minimal
on the weeds.
I wouldn't use it as part of a weed control program.
Specific strategy for that purpose. I mean, there are many other benefits for sure, but not to influence the weed management.
No, absolutely.
Okay, good. That's interesting.
Well, David and Andy, I was going to ask, before we hear from our two growers, any particular feedback that you've had, from your network on this year's harvest? David, let's stick with you.
It's been enormously difficult. I guess the politest way of saying it is variable. There's been huge variation. I think on balance, the crops that have suffered most are the spring crops. We had difficulty because of the cold spring. They were probably drilled later than was hoped for. And then when they were reaching maturation and grain fill, we had such a dry time. They never got anywhere near their yield potential, so that's had a huge impact. Winter cropping, again, it is undoubtedly variable, but what we find is in some cases the yields haven't dipped that much, but it seems to have compromised the quality. So there's difficulties. I guess the one positive we can take out of this is if there is less wheat about or less grain about, which is what a lot of people are saying, then it seems to be maintaining the price. So that's good.
Andy, anything to add?
I think very similar, really. I think some people actually were fearing even worse, and were quite surprised at how little yield they'd lost in some crops. I do remember some conversations in that nightmare spring period where there were people who were going with spring barley for blackgrass control on heavy land, but they were so late they were wondering what they were going to do. What the hell do we do? And I remember reassuring them that as long as they got it in by a certain time, then it's still. But little did I know what we were going to get at the other end of the season, of course. And but I mean, that's the way it goes.
Which you picked your holiday timing so well.
I hear. Yes, in the rain. Yes.
We'll go into more detail shortly with all three of you on the harvest and plans for the autumn. Before we do that, last week I spoke to two growers to get an update from them. We began in Shropshire, just on the border of Wales, with Tom Home, who works at Forge Farm up to Magna in Shrewsbury, and I started by asking him how his harvest had been.
The harvest this year has probably been one of the easiest that I can remember in my short space of farming. We started combining on the 12th of July and everything was finished by the 9th of August. And surprisingly, for all the hot weather and dry days we'd had, the yields were slightly better than we'd expected. The fungicide program's held up very well, considering all the heat and the dry weather that we'd had. We went with a 4 fungicide program, which paid dividends in the end with our yield. Oilseed rape drilling this year has gone very well. It's all gone into the best seed beds I can remember putting it into, and some of the crops are already starting to show through. For the coming crop, we've cultivated some of our stubbles lightly already, especially the rape stubbles, to get some of the rape to regerminate. We've gone through lightly at 2 to 3 inches, and then prior to drilling, we will spray them off with a Roundup, and then we will cultivate them at probably 8 inches before we drill any wheat. We'll start drilling wheat on the 15th of September, and we aim to drill wheat at 250 seeds per square metre. And the sort of herbicide program we plan to use would be Defy and Hurricane. We tend to stack our herbicide program quite heavily at the beginning to try and take out any volunteers. The maize harvest this year will be earlier than, again, anything that's expected. We plan to harvest our maize sort of from the 20th of September onwards, which will allow us to have a really good entry into wheat. We use maize as a very good break crop in our cereals, and also it's used to feed an anaerobic digester. We found using maize and hybrid rye in our rotation that's really helped get our grass weeds under control, particularly the ryegrass, which we suffered from here in Shropshire.
I'm Andrew Ward, and the company is Roy Ward Farms Limited, Glebe Farm, Leadenham, which is in the middle of Lincolnshire in eastern England, and we farm a mixture of crops. We're all arable, growing winter wheat, spring barley, oilseed rape, sugar beet and oats. Harvest this year was variable, I would have said in a word. We have had the winter wheats have done extremely well. We have averaged somewhere in the region of 11.2 tonnes per hectare. The spring crops are a different story because they were very late going in the ground, because on heavy soils here we couldn't drill a lot of the crops while the middle of April at the earliest. And so we lost at least a month, if not 6 weeks, off the start of the growing season. And then harvest was early. We had the heat wave, we had the drought, and we had the lack of moisture. And so the spring crops probably lost a month of growing at the end of the season as well. So every crop has its natural life cycle and the ideal sort of time and number of days and day degrees it needs to be in the ground. And our spring crops were shortened at both ends of the life cycle. And so our yields of the spring barley was about 2.6 tonnes per acre, and the spring wheat was about 2 tonnes per acre. So again, a lot less than what we would normally be. Our fungicide program held up quite well because we never skimp in anything we do. And I think you can vary things in what you do in a wet year. But generally, we still apply a belt and braces approach. We might just slightly alter the rate of some of the products. So as a result, our fungicide program did hold up, and we had crops that were green right to the floor for the majority of the growing season. And it was really only the drought and the lack of rain that curtailed the length of time the crop stayed green rather than any disease. Oilseed rape drilling is steady at the moment. We're not concerned about it because generally we don't drill much rape until we get well into the middle of September. And we find that by drilling slightly later than what a lot of people would consider to be the optimum time, we get less cabbage stem flea beetle pressure. And so therefore we have to use less insecticides, which obviously is a good thing all around. So for us at the moment, we've only drilled around 80 acres of our oilseed rape, and we'll have in the region of 500 acres to go in. But I'm not worried about that at all, because last year, our field we drilled last was the 23rd of September, and that was about the third highest yielding field we had on the farm this harvest. So drilling date for me, Anywhere up to the 20th of September, I would say, is fine and probably preferable because of less insect pressure. Our cereals and chemical approaches this autumn, obviously we revolve quite a lot around glyphosate because we need to control blackgrass, and it's one thing that we are really particular on, and we've just had our 5th blackgrass-free harvest. So glyphosate forms the basis of all our programs when you're looking at herbicides. And at the minute, we don't do too much in the autumn, and we like to see what crops and what the crops are looking like and what the weed spectrum is like before we decide what to use. So we will eventually obviously finish off at the end of the season with Curb, because that's the product for grass weeds. And then what we do before that is a mixture, and we depend on the weed spectrum that we've got when the rape is germinating. Our herbicide program for cereals is quite fixed and has been for a couple of years. And because we are very heavily into controlling blackgrass, we don't drill our cereal crops very early. So we won't drill any cereals or any winter wheat until about the 25th of October. And it's quite a simple program where we rely on 2 litres of Defy. We then have 0.6 of a litre of Liberator, and then we'll go at 0.0 or 0.15 of a litre of Hurricane to add the blackgrass control and just pep it up. So that's our belt and braces, if you like, approach to winter cereals and especially winter wheat. And that is it. We don't do any Avadex granules. We don't do any other herbicides at all. And for that program, combined with hand roguing in the summer and the late spring, that really does us a very good job.
So David, what's your thoughts on what Tom and Andrew had to say there?
It's all very interesting stuff for us. I mean, what pleases me most is the integrated approach. They both spoke about that. They're looking at cultural factors, they're looking at delaying drilling, they're looking at introducing spring cropping. They're getting some good chemistry down in the wheat. They're using prosulfocarb, they're using Hurricane, DFF, flufenicet is being used. Exactly the sort of things. I mean, they're targeting blackgrass with those programs, and they're exactly the sort of active ingredients I'll be thinking about using. So that, in conjunction with the stale seed beds, the use of glyphosate and the spring cropping, and Andrew's a great advocate for the hand roguing as well, and I think that is how he's doing such a good job on keeping on top of the blackgrass. Very pleasing to hear.
Excellent. Well, time to get stuck into the detail here at Home Farm. So yeah, just picking up on that, Tom and Andrew obviously talking about their OSR drilling. Richard, how's your oilseed rape and winter wheat harvest been? And what about your weed control on your previous crop?
Yeah, certainly harvest on this very light land, oilseed rape was hit. Very good stand, lots of pods, but the pods just didn't really fill, so very light seed in it. So where we would normally be expecting yields of around the 4 tonne mark quite comfortably, we ended up with a yield of about 3.4 tonne last year, which in fairness I'm not gonna say I'm overly unhappy with some of the ground that's on this very light land. It just literally almost died in the space of about 3 days. So from an oilseed rape, disappointing, because this ground has got far more potential than that. But with the drought, 3.4, I think I'll take that. And prices have rallied a bit, or did when I managed to sell it. So we made up a bit of the slack on the prices. Wheat wise, we had a very variable year with wheat. Some stronger land on the northern end of the estate. We had several fields running at sort of around the 10 tonne mark, which is about the limit that you'll get off this land. Off the lighter land you won't, but down to a lesson was learnt last year really in drilling wheats late after sort of sugar beet and after veg crops in mid-late November, even down as low as one field, which we probably should have pulled up in the spring, which did 4 tonnes. So a really varied. We grow everything a feed varieties that we grow, so we don't have to worry necessarily about any quality. But yeah, the wheats, some fields remarkably disappointing, some fields quite remarkable that they managed to do 10 tonne, but it was all down to soil type. But the big thing with this land, the later drilling, it just ran together when it started to get wet, and we just lost all our potential. The roots weren't down deep in the light land, and we lost out on the yield on that. So we ended up with an overall average of 7.45, which when we were in the middle of some of these 35-degree days and we were combining wheats at 6 tonne, I'm actually relatively pleased that we got to that position. And from a perspective of the overall weed control last year, we didn't really have any issues. We're very, very fortunate. The one thing you can have for a lot of this brekkie land with a lot of spring crops in the system, we don't have a lot of blackgrass. There's a few little pockets. If we have any blackgrass issues, it goes straight into a 2 spring crop rotation, so it'll be a sugar beet followed by a spring barley, or we'll see if we can get a veg crop in there or whatever. As far as the rate went, I think we mentioned a bit earlier, it was that sort of metazochloroquine Merrick approach followed by a curb, astrocurb in the spring. We're very tidy. So wheats, literally we go anywhere from a stomp DFF on the real lightest land where there's a bit of meadowgrass issue through to, if there is a bit of blackgrass, we'll go more with a liberator stomp approach. So everything really from next to nothing to right the way to the very top on expense.
It's manipulating those active ingredients. We're all pretty familiar with what the active ingredients are and what they're capable of, and you just make them match. On this land particularly, tower might be a good option because that's got a very good broadleaf weed spectrum and very good activity on only meadowgrass. So in those fields, that would be a suitable option.
Well, you mentioned you didn't have blackgrass on not much of it. And in terms of control of blackgrass, ryegrass and broad weed leaves, David, what should our listeners be thinking about doing differently at this time of year?
What we need to be aware of clearly is the weather conditions, what we've been left with after harvest. We've listened to Andrew talk about his hand roguing. Richard does that where he has blackgrass on the estate here as well. We need to be preparing seed beds and seeing what we can do about retaining as much moisture as possible. One bit of information which came out a few weeks ago was the blackgrass dormancy is expected to be very low this autumn. That's the expectation. So there may be an opportunity where we do get some rainfall, do some light tillage, and an opportunity to actually take that out with glyphosate before the crop goes in. And then it's all about planning. Richard's got his planning in place with the Elgar oilseed rape we're in here. It's had Legion on it, so that's a very good basis. It's a good start to the programme. Richard knows exactly what he's planning to do to follow that up. And I would urge people to have that in mind for their cereals as well. It's a case of using these base treatments like we were just talking about, the active ingredients, DFF in Hurricane, pendimethalin in Anthem. Those are the ones we need to be looking at, and for the growers who have serious problems with blackgrass, then the advice has got to be you've got to include flufenisate in that programme, 240 grams per hectare as a pre-emergence treatment. And many of these growers who are battling with blackgrass, they've started to use triolate Avodex granules as well, and they're making some progress with that. So all the components are there. It's just about getting the planning right, and then as the cereal drilling is commencing, then we need to do our utmost to get those pre-ems on within 48 hours of drilling, and that will give us the best chance of getting a good result.
Okay, well we're going to head over to another field. Where are we heading next?
We're heading to a field of wheat which is being drilled today.
Well, as we do that, obviously we've got lots to get through with Richard, David and Andy. Before we do that, and whilst we make our way over to the field, during the summer I caught up with the man behind the fantastic initiative that's doing a brilliant job in educating kids about our industry, and that's FaceTime a Farmer. So we're here in London with Tom Martin, famous for FaceTime a Farmer. Tom, can you tell us a little bit about FaceTime a Farmer and why you set it up?
Well, I really set up FaceTime a Farmer because I see there's a divide, a real divide between people and where their food comes from. There's been a divorce there and a real lack of understanding. I was in Singapore at a conference with the Royal Agricultural Societies of the Commonwealth a couple of years ago, very generously funded by the East of England Agricultural Society. And the idea of FaceTime a Farmer really came from there, looking at how we can use technology that we already have in our pockets to solve some of the problems and some of the questions that we have in farming at the moment. As well as that, schools have a limited time, they have a limited budget. To come onto farms, they need to allocate a full day, organise minibuses, run health and safety checks. And from the farmer's perspective, it's quite an issue as well to be hosting visits. Again, the health and safety element and the time element. The other thing is that I know that my farm will look different in 2 weeks' time to what it looks like today, and it looked different 2 weeks ago to what it looks like today. And so there's that real beautiful seasonality within farming that you just don't capture in a snapshot, in a one-off event. And so really that's where FaceTime a Farmer comes from, using technology that we have at the moment to answer some of the questions and the issues, the challenges that we have within farming and food production.
So talk us through a typical session. How does that actually all work?
It's remarkably simple. And when I'm talking to farmers and teachers who are looking to take on FaceTime a Farmer, I ask them 3 questions. I say to them, do you have a smartphone? Most people say yes. I say, have you ever made a call via FaceTime or Skype? And again, most people say yes. And the third question is, can you spare 10 minutes a fortnight? And again, most people can spare 10 minutes a fortnight. A typical session, and it's really, really focused around education, will involve, the sessions I run with my school last about 10 minutes. I've already emailed the teacher early in the week to say, what are you studying? And she'll reply and say, she might say natural selection or climate change or animal biology or genetic engineering or really anything from a whole range of subjects that they're studying at school. And I then make sure that when it comes to the Skype call that we set up, I'm appropriately positioned on the farm. So I've been sitting between 2 fields of different types of oilseed rape to look at genetic differences. I've been standing on the top of a muck heap to talk about soil biology. I've been next to our beehives to talk about bees and the role of pollinators. And really what happens is the children get to see and experience firsthand, right in front of them, what they've been studying for the previous fortnight. It comes alive, and it's amazing to hear their questions. They normally have some questions prepared. But we just have a fantastic conversation. It lasts 10 to 15 minutes. I get a real buzz from it as a farmer, and I'm hearing the feedback is from the schools are really, really having a great time as well.
And when was the first one that you did? When did this all start?
So I ran a pilot myself with one school, which is Harbour Primary down in New Haven on the south coast. A number of schools were interested in working on that pilot, but I selected them. They had a very keen teacher, which is fantastic. They had really good IT setup, and they were an urban school. They were a relatively deprived area and a state school as well. So I wanted to make sure that we were really reaching people who were potentially furthest away from understanding farming, food production and rural life. That was 2 years ago, and we ran a pilot, just me, one farmer with them, one class for the first year, really through the kind of spring and summer terms. And we've just recently, in the last year, rolled it out with Leaf, who've been fantastically supportive. And we now have 110 farmers signed up at about 70 schools. So. Wow. I know it's really taken off. It's exceeded our expectations.
So in terms of that, then, how are you measuring the success of it? Because obviously, yeah. So that's one way of looking at it in terms of the growth of it. But what other things are you putting in place to say, yeah, this is really working?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of ways. There are the kind of we can measure with numbers. We can measure how many farmers, how many schools we've got signed up, how many children are part of the programme. But I think we can also. It's really interesting to get the anecdotal feedback, just how alive education is coming for these children, the kind of questions they're asking that is completely unexpected from the teachers and from the farmers' perspective, and actually how much they're retaining. So the children that I've been interacting with, the class I interacted with for the first year, they were asking questions at the end of June, referring to something some bees that we'd been looking at in the end of March, or they'd be talking about all the things they've learnt. And you're really demonstrating actually what they've taken on board.
Brilliant. And obviously this is UK based at the moment. Any plans to go international with it? Because I'm guessing there's, they're starting to get a bit of a momentum.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
So broadly, my real perspective, my passion is education. And I've said if it becomes entertainment, I'm not interested. It's really about education. And primarily for British school children, and I want them to be able to see where their food comes from, how we steward the British countryside, and that's where the ongoing relationship with a British farmer from a British classroom comes from. That said, I've had conversations with farmers and teachers, with agricultural companies and with educational authorities from around the world who are really fascinated to run a similar project to this, and it may well be that in the future we do that. And it might be that my school down in New Haven are wanting to study the African savannah or drylands geomorphology or the effect of climate change in Kenya, and actually they do a one-off Skype call to a farmer down there that's involved in FaceTime a farmer in that country. But primarily British school children, British farmers, but really it's limitless.
Yeah.
Possibilities are endless. Yeah.
It's interesting though, because you talk about giving up 10 minutes, here and there, but this must be taking over your life, isn't it? How much of your time is this, taken up in terms of like your actual day-to-day job on the farm? Is there an impact on that?
I think it's easy to allocate your time, your resource to something you're passionate about.
Yeah.
So I haven't found it an issue at all. But really, that's why I started to work with LEAF. And there have been a number of organisations I work with. I mentioned the Royal Agricultural Society of the Commonwealth. I mentioned the East of England Agricultural Society. But LEAF, Linking Environment and Farming, have been absolutely fantastic. And they have the chance to give me some administrative support to link up the farmers and the school teachers that they can do that I just can't do. The opportunity for growth in this isn't Tom Martin taking on multiple classes. Actually, I believe it's one farmer in one classroom and getting more farmers and more schools, more classes involved. So the idea isn't that it grows and grows and takes more and more of your time. It's just that it becomes more exciting and those farmers and those classrooms get more involved from it. But what I have done is we've recorded my teacher, so Miss Mellor, Olivia Mellor. We've recorded some podcasts of our own. To show people, to show farmers, to show teachers what we've learnt and how they can run sessions themselves. And we've run Q&A sessions as well on Facebook Live. So again, people can ask questions. How did you do it? How did you get over this? How did you deal with technical issues, et cetera, et cetera? So it has taken a little bit of time, but as I say, in terms of farmers and teachers getting involved, it's maximum reward for minimum input, which is great.
So based on that, what's the plans for the next sort of 12 to 18 months?
Well, we've had interest in the political and the kind of government sphere as well, and the government are really focusing on STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and maths. And I think there's really an opportunity for FaceTime a Farmer to link in with that. There are local authorities who are looking to work with us. I've had meetings with a number of government ministers who are really excited about this. So really, as I said, the opportunities are endless, and the sky's the limit. And we're just really taking this simple idea and hoping to open it up to as many people as possible. And it's not, even in the end, it's not just about showing children where their food comes from, but inspiring the workforce of the future. Because in farming, we in 10 to 15, 20 years' time aren't just going to need farmers, but we're going to need technicians, we're going to need engineers, we're going to need software developers, we're going to need agronomists and chemists. So actually, it's inspiring these children to see that farming isn't about just putting a seed in the ground and waiting for it to grow. Yeah. There's so much more involved in it. And the opportunity in today's biological revolution and digital revolution that we're a part of is huge for children to shape their future careers.
Brilliant. Well, sitting here listening to you talk about it, you can clearly see how that passion is coming through. So it's absolutely brilliant, and genuinely congratulations on what you've achieved so far. Now, before we let you go, I know you're also chairing the East of England Farming Conference that's taking place coming up this November, so November the 1st. I'm assuming you wanted to give that a quick plug, to let our listeners know what's going on there. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening and where they can get further information about that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm really excited about that as well. The East of England Farming Conference this year, it's on Thursday, the 1st of November. We've got a fascinating lineup of speakers covering leading politicians, big decision makers. We've got a number of scientists and leading thinkers from the kind of technical side of things, and we've got some fantastic farmer practitioners who are going to be showing us what they've done on their farm. And really, I leave conferences and events, particularly this one, just feeling so inspired and motivated. So it's about inspiring farmers and landowners to go back to look at their businesses and to work out how they can drive them forward in the next few years. It's really exciting. This year we're doing a few things that are a little bit different. We're going to be streaming live to some agricultural colleges around the country, and they'll be able to use the app that we use for asking questions, again, to interact and ask questions live. So there's a lot we're doing. We've got some fantastic sponsors, and it'll be obviously a brilliant networking opportunity as ever. East of England Farming Conference, just search online or contact the East of England Agricultural Society, Thursday the 1st of November. Be there.
I think you've done a good enough plug for that one. Listen, Tom, I really appreciate you giving up some time to tell us about FaceTime a Farmer in particular. So just a reminder to all our listeners, if you want more information about that, you simply go to facetimeafarmer.com. But for now, Tom Martin, thanks for joining the show.
My great pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so we've now made our way to one of the wheat fields here on Home Farm, where you may hear in the background that they're actually doing some drilling here. Richard, before we carry on with our discussions on the technical side of stuff, I was just keen to hear what your thoughts were on what Tom's achieved with FaceTime a Farmer.
Firstly, what a brilliant initiative. It's one of those things where you sort of think, I can't believe that we haven't all thought about it in the past with technology as it is at the moment. And I think if we can sort of get farming into the classroom rather than trying to get children out onto the farm. I've done it on more than one occasion, and sometimes they're a bit distracted by the shiny kit and they'll ask you more about how much does that cost looking at a combine rather than what does it actually combine and what's made from what it combines. So I think anything that we can do to educate, encourage. We need another generation of young people coming through into farming, and just as farm workers and managers in the future. So yeah, I think it's a brilliant initiative, and I wish him all the best with it.
Fantastic, excellent. Well, yeah, I mean, from the classroom to the field, and I have to say it is quite exciting. You know, for someone that doesn't spend as much time on the farm, being out here and seeing the tractor out here drilling is it's quite exciting actually. Now, we're keen to understand what your approach is to the use of pre-emergent herbicides, Richards. Any thought on that?
The pre-emergence approach here is a very wide one, really. On the very, very light brekkie land, we'd have no blackgrass issues at all. The only sort of grass issues we have on that are more meadow grass, so we will go with a pendimethalin approach, followed but with some DFF really as the absolute basic, right the way through to where we do have blackgrass issues, where we introduce the flufenicet as liberator and mixing in some pendimethalin where required and any more DFF, etc. So, you know, blackgrass obviously isn't the real big problem. We do have a couple of places where there's a bit of ryegrass issues, and we adjust accordingly. But I think, as been mentioned before, your pre-emergence, that's the number one hit for any of your weeds really. We will, you know, obviously you get something come through in the spring which we can take care of with sulfonyl ureas, etc. But whatever you're doing, whether you've got blackgrass or you haven't got blackgrass, it's still the most important spray from my perspective from weed control, getting that base in there.
Yeah, I'd have to agree entirely. You need to be planning for that. We were talking about planning earlier. In my view, you've got to plan, especially when you've got significant grassweed pressure, be it blackgrass or ryegrass, and get that planning done so it allows you the time to get that pre-emergence on behind the drill. We're seeing it's being drilled now. The ideal is, as I've said, within 48 hours. The use of the products that Richard's just mentioned, diflufenicam, we've got Hurricane, pendimethalin, we've got Anthem. There's all these different components, and because you can use them in that way, you can put the rate up a little or you can put the rate down a little. It gives you great flexibility. If we want flufenicet, then we've got Herald. There's many different approaches, but the important thing is that you do get that down as a true pre-emergence.
Okay, so before I get on to the next question, as the tractor makes its way back to us, Richard, tell us a little bit about what. Obviously, as I said, we'll take some pictures for our social channels, but tell us a little bit about what's going on here then.
Well, it's we're running a Fendt with a Vardistat drill on the back, and it's all completely GPS guidance, so the driver isn't steering it himself. The drill itself also, we're now not calibrating drills to kilos per hectare of seed, where the drill will actually run at, you just program in how many seeds per square metre to plant at. For this variety Gleam, on lighter land we do go at slightly heavier rates, so we're putting on about 300 seeds, which I know some people would say is a lot for this time of year, but yeah, it's and the tractor also has a system on it where you can alter the tyre pressures on the move to eradicate. So you go down the road at one pressure, you can drop the tyre pressures down on the move as well. So it's
amazing.
It's a big green thing full of technology.
Fantastic. Okay, let's get back to the topic of the podcast. We talked about obviously the ridiculously dry summer we've had. Andy, what's your advice for the inevitable slug pressure that we assume will come when the rain returns?
Yeah, well, I think obviously we had a really hot year, dry year, and I guess people could look at that and think, well, okay, so all those slugs have gone now. Well, clearly we know, you know, slugs go down to depth. Then we've had some nice moisture. Temperatures are optimum for slugs, you know, so the risks clearly remain. And I think, like anything else, slugs it's about risk, and it's risk factors. You know, you're dealing with what's in front of you. I mean, clearly Richard here, he's talked about, he's got a lot of light land on this estate, but then he has some more bodied stuff. I mean, what we stood in here, clearly I can see this seed bed, you know, it's there's one or two clods in here, so this would be something where I would assume to reduce the risk, you know, it'd be rolling to compact this down a bit. Obviously it's high risk because it's following a break crop. And people should be using maybe trapping techniques to try and monitor levels of slugs, etc., and then use an appropriate treatment. So I don't know, Richard, what do you do here? Are you metaldehyde? Are you ferric? Are you a mix?
Yeah, we're a mix really. Certainly early on, we'll slug trap somewhere like this, especially following oilseed rape. It's a very difficult one because, like you were saying, people could almost be lulled in, especially on this light land, be lulled into a false sense of security that the slug pressure is very low. Generally, I've found with slugs, if you think you've conquered it, that's when they get you.
Yeah.
So we will actually slug trap every field. A lot of fields will get one whiz round the headland, especially where we've got our higher tier margins. You find as the slugs and the snails creep in from the side. So we think that we're not actually that big a user of sort of a metaldehyde mini pellet type approach, and anything later, if we have problems later, that's when we'll bring in the sort of the ferric when it gets wetter conditions, because they obviously have that longevity. But yeah, like I said, we think, well, we haven't got much slug problem, but when we see at the end of the year in the stock, you know, we've still used 6-7 ton of pellets, and certainly on the rape, everything's had 3 kilos on everything on the rape.
Okay.
So yeah, no, although it's not a huge problem, it still worries me.
Excellent. I want to get your tips for our listeners as we head towards the autumn. I'm going to give you a few minutes to have a think about that, though, because when I spoke to Andrew Ward, who we heard from earlier, I also asked him to give us an update on Forage Aid, which is the initiative he founded.
Forage Aid was a charity that I started myself in 2013, and that was as a result of the very late snows at the end of March, where thousands and thousands of sheep, some people say there are 80 to 100,000 sheep, were buried under deep snow in Cumbria and Wales. So I sort of took pity on the farmers. It was all over the news, and I asked arable farmers to donate straw and haylage and hay and anything they had to help the livestock industry. And a lot of people were very kind and generous. And so we got a lot of support for Wales and Cumbria in 2013. And in that year, we helped about 47 farmers had free straw and silage and hay to keep their sheep alive. And that came from about 75 different farmers who donated. So we had a lot of good support and a lot of help from lots of people. That was all taken free haulage as well. So the farmers couldn't afford to pay for it. So everything was free, which was a great success. Then in 2014, we had the Somerset floods, and that was a very, very big catastrophe where 40,000 acres of farmland was underwater and a huge number of livestock farms were having enormous difficulty. I was asked to go and help down at Sedgemoor Market. There's a few local farmers who got together to start a donation scheme themselves, and Forage Aid then became active down in Somerset. After the floods disappeared, which was quite some time, it was about 6 months altogether by the time everything was back to normal, I got together with some of the farmers in Somerset, another farmer in Essex, and some other organisations such as JCB and Tesco and CF Fertilisers, and we then became a full charity. Then we just got charity status, and in 2015, in December 2015, the Cumbria floods arrived, and that was an even worse catastrophe because there was a massive amount of sheep got washed away and washed out into the Irish Sea, and so we became operational there again, and we moved in the region of 120 lorry loads of silage and straw, and we helped a lot of farmers just in the Cumbria area. So that is the sort of history of Forage Aid, and we rely on donations from farmers all over the UK who will donate us straw and hay or anything that they have got to give, and we then move it free of charge with the contacts we have in the haulage industry. We move it to the affected area. And so obviously Cumbria up in the northwest is a long way from a lot of the areas where a lot of the straw and hay was. So the haulage costs are always very high, but we are enormously grateful to the hauliers who move it free of charge, and the other farmers who donate the straw and hay also free to help the livestock industry. At the moment, Forage Aid at the present time is on standby. We've had a few cases being brought to our attention, farmers who are struggling to feed their animals. Our main mandate and our main criteria and our aims and objectives are that we help to relieve animals' suffering as a result of an extreme weather event. And that is quite crucial in the weather event phrase. And obviously that in the past has been on floods, it's been with snow, and it's anything related to weather. The current heat wave that we have been having this last summer is a prolonged weather period. And a lot of the people that we're talking to at the moment and the cases that have been brought to our attention hasn't really manifested itself from this heat wave. It's been a long period from the spring. The spring was very wet, as you remember, and the animals had to be turned out very late. And so the animals and the grass that were being grazed in the spring were suffering. And so a lot of the farmers had to use the silage that they would normally produce for this coming winter has had to be fed over the summer because of the heat wave, and the grass hasn't growing. So it's been a very difficult year for all sectors in farming. But the arable industry at the moment is coping well with the dry weather, and the crops are being able to get in the ground. But the situation for the livestock industry this winter is there will be a shortage of silage and the shortage of forage for the livestock farmers to feed their animals. But I don't think it's going to be quite as bad as it was because of the recent rains that we've had. So as a sort of a long shot, we are in touch with all the regular charities. We work very closely with ArableAware and FCN, and we're in touch with them regularly at the moment. And we have had a few cases being brought to us to assess, but at the moment we haven't helped anybody because the people haven't met our criteria. If anybody would like to find out more about Forage Aid, or how we operate, or how they can support us, or how they can support any of the livestock farmers, or indeed if there's any farmer themselves who would like help, or they think they would like some help from Forage Aid, please visit the website, which is forageaid.org.uk, and all the information is on there on how we operate and who to contact if they are willing to donate any straw or any hay or any produce, or indeed if the farmer themselves are wanting some help and support from us. All the details are on our website.
Thanks again there to Andrew Ward for giving us that update. Right, to finish off this episode, as I warned you before that clip, any final tips for our listeners as we head towards the autumn? David, let's come to you first.
I think the obvious one, Russ, is one we've already touched on, and that is following through on the planning, getting where you've got significant grassweed pressure for sure, that pre-emergence application on in good time. So get it on within 48 hours remains the best advice, I believe. But the other thing I would stress is that we're hearing lots of good stories now about adoption of proper integrated approaches, cultural, drilling dates, spring cropping, and the benefits that's bringing. So I would urge people to continue to look at using integrated approaches to maximise the benefits when looking at weed control.
Andy, tip from you?
Yeah, I think similar to David in a way in terms of integrated controls. If I think of slugs going through the autumn, then very much what Richard was saying, you know, trapping, assessing levels with layers mashing, traps, etc. Dealing with what's in front of you, and actually if you're going to use a pellet, you know, choosing a good quality pellet that's going to spread and spread well and do the job for you. One other thing I would just note, going back to oilseed rape where we were earlier on, just like to talk about vigilance really in terms of insect pests. I mean, we've obviously talked a lot about cabbage stem flea beetle, but one thing that we need to keep an eye on as well Mysis aphids, in terms of transmitting virus in rape, and we need to be aware of there's monitoring done for numbers, and so monitoring that, because we can react to that with products, providing we reach thresholds and it's justified to use. For example, we've got a product called Pymetrazine plenum, which will actually take out resistant Mysis persicae, which are transmitters of virus in rape. So that's a good one to just keep at the back of my mind. Keep open, keep monitoring, keep watching, and deal with risk in front of you.
Well done for battling against the sound of the aircraft again there, Richard. We should probably explain, because that's the second time we've had the noise coming through.
Norfolk, lots of Air Force bases. The sound of aircraft, jets and helicopters in the sky is a very regular thing. We don't even really notice it, but yeah, it's a regular thing.
Okay, well I'll give you the last word. Any final thoughts from you as we head towards the autumn?
Yeah, I think from a perspective of the actual autumn and farming itself, I think really, who am I to give people technical tips on the autumn? Really, I think my tip would mainly be sort of a bit in light of what happened yesterday with the new agriculture bill. As we're stood out in the field here in the sun with a big tractor roaring up and down. There's far harder ways of earning a living, and I think my way of looking at it is, with things like the agriculture bill coming up, let's not get our heads down and let's look forward, because agriculture is a great business, and we've fought through, as farmers, we've fought through hard times before, and I'm sure we can come out the other side. And it's just, keep a smile on your face. This is a hell of an industry and there's some incredible people in it.
Brilliant.
So not so much of a tip, more of my thoughts on the future, really.
Good message to finish on.
Yeah.
Tremendous. All right, well, that's actually it for our third episode of ArableAware. Thanks once again to David Roberts and Andy Bailey of Adama for joining me here, and of course to Richard Cobbold at Home Farm for hosting us and bringing us out to the two fields today. Just a quick reminder that you can listen to all previous episodes of this series by visiting uk.information-hub.adama.com/ArableAware, or just go to adama.com/UK/EN and search for podcast. You should be able to find us. Plus, you can subscribe to the show on all your podcast platforms such as iTunes and Spotify. Just search for ArableAware, but make sure you type it in all as one word. And if you do, please do give us a positive rating and review, especially on iTunes, as that helps us up the podcast charts, and of course that will be very nice to do. Finally, if you've got anything you want to comment on or want us to cover off in future episodes, then please just get in touch with the team, either via the hub, on our Facebook page, or via Twitter using @AdamaUK_, or simply by emailing us using the address ukinquiries@adama.com. But for now, thanks for listening and goodbye.